Hey everyone, welcome into the Sportscaster and Her Son. This is where we like to say that sports bridges the gap between the generations. That's because if you look at us, the two co-hosts, I'm the mom, I'm 60, and Jason is my son.
I was just about to say that you're 45.
I know, I appreciate that. I'm the 12-time Emmy Award-winning sportscaster from Chicago. I work at ESPN Radio in Chicago. I am the host of the Chicago Bears postgame show and Peggy and Dion on Saturday mornings.
And I'm Jason. I'm 21 years old. I'm a senior here at the University of Texas. I'm the sports director of Texas Student Television. Recently have joined the Field of 68 Media Network as a co-host of Hook 'em Hoops, brand new Texas basketball podcast. So be sure to check that out if you're into college basketball. Super happy to be on talking some baseball with you today, Mom. It's kind of a not so great time in Chicago sports, but we're going to make the most of it.
I have to tell you, when the World Series was happening, I didn't watch any of it. I had been so turned off by baseball the last month of the season. What's that?
I said you and most of the country in terms of not watching the World Series.
Yeah, exactly. So, but lo and behold, while the South Side team is trying to rebuild, they're changing the organization with a new general manager now. And as they work towards that, out of the weeds came the Cubs with a shocking move, letting David Ross go and hiring Craig Counsell away from the Brewers. I mean, it's crazy.
It is an absolutely shocking move, Mom. And to be honest with you, what was just as shocking as the move that the Cubs made to pry Craig Counsell from the Milwaukee Brewers is how much they're paying him. Craig Counsell is now the highest paid manager in Major League Baseball. This is not just without a World Series ring, but without a World Series appearance. So even though Craig Counsell is so well accomplished and well regarded in Major League Baseball, it is a bit of a gamble for the Cubs, but a gamble that they kind of needed to make. The big criticism down the stretch when the Cubs blew their shot at making the playoffs was some of the decisions that David Ross made, really put the Cubs in a tough spot. Craig Counsell has been applauded for his bullpen management and his in-game management. That was exactly what David Ross came up short in.
Well, the Cubs came up short at the end of the season, and I think the fact that at one point they had a very comfortable lead for the wild card, and that diminished in the final few weeks of the season, that alone, do you think, opened the door for Cubs executives to start thinking about making a change?
No, I'll be honest with you, Mom. I think that Major League executives have been looking at the situation in Milwaukee for the last couple of years. Craig Counsell was not given a contract extension before this season. The Brewers are in a little bit of a money crunch. They have $100 million of stadium renovations that the MLB is demanding them to put through, and they just can't afford it. And so teams have been looking at this Brewers situation, looking at, hey, why aren't they extending Craig Counsell? He's one of the best young managers in the sport. Craig Counsell ended up interviewing with Cleveland. He interviewed with the Mets. He interviewed again with Milwaukee and then interviewed with the Cubs. And none of us knew that he interviewed with the Cubs until they had hired him. And so this was something where I think down the stretch of the season, the Cubs maybe didn't have playoff expectations going into the year. And David Ross did a good job of managing them in the first half and into August. But when the team kind of falls apart like that, part of what you lose is the locker room. And with the Cubs planning on retaining quite a few players from last year's team, I think it's smart that they're changing things up and bringing in somebody who is very well respected across the league. Craig Counsell played for 15 seasons, and he's on, I believe this will be his seventh or eighth season managing now. So bringing in somebody that well respected, you can't help but be reminded of the Joe Madden move, because this is so much like what the Cubs did when they brought in Joe Madden in 2015.
Well, and it's what a lot of teams seem to be doing now. They have that placeholder manager. When you have a young team, you bring in that placeholder to kind of instill professionalism, teach these guys how to be major leaguers. But that's not typically the manager that you stick with to take you to the promised land.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that was kind of important here was obviously the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, but ever since then, they faded back into mediocrity. So the shock waves that this move kind of sends across the MLB is like, oh shoot, the Cubs are actually still the Cubs. They still have this kind of pull. They can still prize somebody from a division winner. Yes, they're paying him way more than Milwaukee was paying him. But at the end of the day, this kind of shows that even though Craig Counsell has been to the playoffs however many consecutive seasons, or I think it was like 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 8 seasons in Milwaukee where they made the postseason, he probably thinks that he has maxed out there because of their lack of financial resources, just the fact that, I mean, they haven't made the National League Championship Series since 2018. And so a lot more can be accomplished in Chicago. I think the Cubs are getting ready to spend big. They're already spending big on the manager. We'll see if they bring Cody Bellinger back. Juan Soto is another name that has been mentioned a lot with the Cubs. I'm excited, Mom. I think that the Cubs, this is, like I said, it's very reminiscent of 2015 when they brought in Joe Madden. I think that we'll see a move this winter, that'll also be reminiscent of that offseason when they brought in John Lester, and then the offseason afterwards when they brought in Jason Hayward. Obviously, those two signings had very mixed results, but it was the fact that the Cubs were back, spending big money, showing that they want to win, that they're going to funnel all their resources to win. Feels like that again, and I can't help but be excited.
Everyone thought that it was a foregone conclusion that Craig Counsell was going to the Mets, that he was going to New York. They had the money to spend. They have an owner that's willing to spend the money. I thought it was interesting. The day that we are taping this podcast episode is the day that the Cubs introduced Craig Counsell to the media. And sure enough, Craig Counsell did talk about some of his questions for the Cubs and feeling them out was really what direction is this team headed and what is the financial stability and where is there room to spend? He literally asked, where is there room to spend?
It's exactly what I was saying. The lack of financial resources in Milwaukee, it's something we don't talk about a whole lot in professional sports, but there are Major League Baseball teams who literally cannot spend. Look at Pittsburgh, look at Baltimore, look at Milwaukee. Somehow they have been able to make the postseason however many times in a row. But even a guy like Craig Counsell, who is such a he played in Milwaukee. You know, he has a ballpark. He's a little league ballpark in a neighborhood in Milwaukee named after him. And he just must have felt that he didn't have the resources to win anymore. And what I'm really curious about is, I wonder if the Mets offered him more money, because you know that the Mets could have. Steve Cohen is a guy who is not at all afraid to dip into his own pockets when it comes to spending on free agents and bringing in the right guys. And I'll be honest, the Mets, you know, the Cubs might be closer to home for Craig Counsell, but the Mets is going to be a better situation because they have a top farm system in baseball. They're going to spend every single offseason, and he's going to make more money than he would anywhere else. So what I'm curious about is, you know, you bring up the questions that Craig Counsell had that led him to Chicago, but what are the answers that the Cubs gave that put them above New York and above returning to Milwaukee, other than the financials between the Cubs and Milwaukee? That's what I'm really curious about.
Well, I'll tell you something. For a guy who considers himself a Midwest guy, a walk your dog down the street kind of guy, you know, maybe he didn't want to be in New York. His kids go to college in the Midwest. Maybe he really just wanted to stay in the Midwest. And maybe it didn't take that much for the Cubs to convince him that the Cubs are close. I have to agree with you. I think the Cubs are planning on spending, and that was a big reason why Craig Counsell, you know, the Cubs just came out of nowhere. He said he hadn't even thought about the Cubs. And then all of a sudden there was this interest, and they had a little feeling out of each other like, where could this go? So I'm with you. I think that the Cubs convinced him they are going to be spenders and that they are going to be in it to win it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jason, let's bring in our guest. He's a Blue Island native, Chicagoan, played 16 seasons in Major League Baseball, 3-time All-Star. He's a World Series winner, Silver Slugger Award, Roberto Clemente Award. He's an analyst for TBS Baseball. I mean, Curtis Granderson, what have you not done in this game of baseball?
Hey, they keep letting me come back. That gave me an opportunity to do all those little things. Definitely didn't plan on playing that long, but because I did, I was able to go ahead and accumulate some of those accolades.
So I have to tell you that even though we had never met, my career here in Chicago as a sportscaster is precluded by my brother was a coach at UIC. He was a coach of the Flames, and he scouted you before he left the UIC program, Dan Kaczynski. So I feel like I just kind of followed your career for so many years. And then when I watched you play for all these other teams, you made Chicago proud. You really made Chicago proud. You are such a wonderful representative of our city and of the game of baseball.
I appreciate that. And tell your brother, please, hello, and thank you for recruiting. I know he obviously wasn't there when I was there, but even just to get those eyeballs on it and kind of bring it full circle to you and I chatting right now. One of the things I always talk to people about was whenever I got a chance to come home, I was definitely going to represent and enjoy being home. And no matter where I went, I always made sure I yelled from as high as I could, Chicago, and that's where I'm from. That's where I'm raised, where my parents are. So I still have my roots at to this day. So it's always been something that I've tried to represent, regardless of the places I've been, which have been some amazing places, but Chicago is always home.
Tell us about your baseball upbringing. Where did it start? Who was the influence for you? I had 7 brothers, and we would play pickup games in the parking lots, and I was like, oh, Peggy, we need you. Go play right field. So what was your upbringing in Chicago with baseball?
So it started with T-ball, but I didn't necessarily say, hey, I wanted to play T-ball. The reason that I ended up playing T-ball, I had a lot of friends I was playing with, and all of a sudden one day those friends weren't out there. And I said, where did they go? My mom and dad said, oh, they signed up for T-ball. I didn't want to be left out. So I ended up signing up for T-ball as well, just so I can be with those friends that I had been riding bikes with and, playing, shooting around the basketball in the backyard or throwing a football or something like that with. That's how it started. And then from there, it just continued to blossom and grow. Now, I had watched baseball. I was a fan of baseball. I had baseball cards, but I never thought about playing in an organized setting until that situation happened. So now I get my candy bars that I have to sell in order to be on the team and get my T-shirt with the local marketing, the local business on the back of it. And the rest is history. And that's how it all started.
As we talked about, you're really a Chicagoan through and through, from growing up on the South Side, going to Curie High School, and then going to the University of Illinois at Chicago. One of the most interesting things about your story, though, to me is, and I'm a huge college basketball guy, you actually decided on UIC because you were also planning on playing basketball. So tell me about your experience at UIC and how it ended up going differed from what you expected it to be when you committed to the school.
So part of the big reason why I ended up signing at UIC was because they were going to give me an opportunity to walk on the basketball team. I was recruited heavily between Illinois State, Northern Illinois, and UIC, where I ultimately ended up going to school. And one of the biggest things that I wanted was, yes, I'm going to have an opportunity to play baseball at the college level, which is great. But one of my biggest goals and dreams was to play college basketball and to do it at the Division I level. So I wasn't getting recruited D1. But I figured, hey, if I'm going to be there playing baseball at a team that has a basketball program, let me see if I can walk on over there. So Coach Jimmy Collins at the time was the head basketball coach of UIC, and Coach D was going into his second year. Said, hey, I'll set up a meeting, get you a chance to talk to him. I met with Jimmy Collins. Jimmy said, hey, I'll definitely get you into a summer league. We can start practicing, start playing, start training. And then once the school year starts, get your baseball taken care of, and after baseball practice, come on over and start practicing with us. So I'm like, yes, here we go. I'm about to do baseball. I'm about to do basketball. I'm going to be a dual sport athlete at the D1 level. The first official basketball practice, I had baseball practice earlier that day. I'm the runner on second base. We're running pickoff plays to second base. Pick off to second base. I slide back into the base. Shortstop falls on me. I get up to go. And somehow I must have pushed down. I ended up tearing a ligament in my thumb. Took 5 steps, stopped. I said, ooh, that's not good. And that ended my basketball career. I said, well, can't make it to basketball practice. I walked in, told Jimmy Collins, had a little kind of splint on my thumb, said I can't play. Thank you for the opportunity. But since I'm here on this baseball scholarship, let's see what happens. And that's how it all ended up happening. So that's as close as my basketball college dreams came to possibly coming true. But in reality, I was a much better baseball player than I was a basketball player. And UIC's basketball team at that time was really good. They went to the dance 2 out of the 4 years I was there. Wow. One of our point guards, Martell Bailey, led the country in assists back-to-back years. And Cedric Banks, our shooting guard, is the all-time leading scorer. So I wasn't going to play over them, but I just wanted to be on the team. And I got close, but that's as far as it went.
You mentioned some of those great names in UIC basketball history. Well, at the same time at the school, you became arguably the greatest name in UIC baseball history, so much so that you ended up coming back to the school, got your degree, helped fund the baseball field, and now the field is named after you. What does it mean to have a legacy at your alma mater that is synonymous with the baseball program there?
It's so cool. And, going back to the degree part of it, it was one of the things that a lot of my teammates in the minor leagues would always talk to me about, because when I got drafted, I was a junior. So I still had a year and a half left of school left. And I told the Detroit Tigers at that time, hey, I'm still going to try to finish. So they have what they put a lot of minor league players in. It's called instructional league. They send you there at the end of your first minor league season to get you a little bit more instruction, whether it's a new position, a new stance, whatever that happens to be. I said, well, I'm not going instructional league the first year. I'm already set to go back to school. Is it okay if I miss and go the next year? So Tiger said, okay. Now, while I'm in school, I'm still also playing my minor league season. And one of my final classes that I had to take in order to graduate, I had to go to my manager's office. I had to sit in front of them, take the test to make sure I didn't cheat. He signed off on it. I FedExed it in back to the school, got the grade, got emailed if I passed or failed the class. And that's how I ended up getting on path to continue to graduate on time with my class. And the number of teammates were like, how are you going to school? How are you doing this? But communication and transparency was key. I just kept talking to my professors. I kept talking to the Tigers. I kept talking to my College of Business, and that allowed me an opportunity to do it. So then fast forward, I get a chance to make it to the major leagues, and we have an opportunity to grow the stadium. So I said, all right, let's go ahead and do something big here. And we got the stadium built, and almost 10 years ago, it was 2014 is when we opened up the stadium. So next year will be the 10-year anniversary of the stadium opening. And I still can't call it my name. Everyone always goes, hey, are we going to Granderson Stadium? I call it CG Stadium because I can't say my name when I'm talking about it. But I love being out there, and I love bragging that we have the best view in all of baseball.
Really quick, I want to say, because Curtis Granderson Field seems to pop up on Twitter and Instagram every year when baseball season rolls around, like, oh, look at the skyline, such a beautiful field. When you were playing, did you yourself ever take some batting practice there, try to hit some bombs into the Chicago skyline?
You know what's crazy? The one thing that really stands out about the skyline part of it is the year I got drafted, 2002, rewind back to that fall. That's September 11, 2001. So if you remember, that happened at around like 9, 10 in the morning that day, Chicago time. Well, we still had practice schedules. So schools are getting canceled, people are getting sent home, but we were still going. And if you remember back then, a lot of planes would fly into O'Hare and they would wrap around the Sears Tower and then go in. And prior to that, it's like, oh, it's going to hit the building. Oh, no, it didn't, right? Like that was just a joke that you would always have, especially being on the field. Well, now it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon after this historic event just happened. Planes are still in the air because they haven't made it to their destination. And here they come. And every time it's batting practice or a pitch or a ground ball, this plane would come, we would stop and look and go, is this it? Is this it? And sure enough, the plane would go around. Like it was a crazy scenario to be in, but the view was right there. So we were watching it literally every 10 or 15 minutes. We were stopping. Okay, all right. Whew. Because, remember back to that moment in time, it was just a crazy place to be.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Jason went to school at St. Ignatius. His sister goes to school at St. Ignatius. We drive by Curtis Granderson Field all the time. And it's just so cool to have that legacy because like my daughter even asked me, she said, who is that? And I said, oh, one of the great baseball player from Chicago, chose to go to UIC. He said he's just a great representative of the city. It's really cool to have that legacy passed down and have people ask who it is. Forever they'll be asking that and people will talk about you. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And we get a chance to get a lot of people on the field in a number of different ways, whether it's the UIC baseball team, any of the other athletic programs that want to practice there, plus a lot of the kids in the community and different events that just happen to go there. I like to have meetings there in the suite if I get an opportunity to do it, because if I'm going to close a deal, I just tell them to look out the window real quick and go, this could all be yours. See those buildings, see that skyline? This is part of the package. So we try to utilize that as best we can.
And Curtis, one of those programs that you're talking about is the Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy that you have started. Tell us about this program in growing the game of baseball for kids in Chicago.
This is so awesome because when I did the stadium in 2014, part of the reason why I wanted to do that was also to allow the community as a whole have access to one of the best fields in not only the city, but in the country. And what's crazy is, and you both know it because your families go to St. Ignatius, there are families that live right there that have never stepped foot on a college campus. And just for the audience out there that doesn't realize, the college campus is at Roosevelt and Morgan. St. Ignatius is right there. And there are people that live, we're talking a 30-second walk, a minute walk, a 5-minute walk, that have never stepped foot on a college campus. So I figured sport was always one of those things that was just a neutralizer. You can bring people from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, and diversities, and just bring them through the game, especially this great game of baseball. Now we get them on the field to practice, play, and train all year long. And as you know, Chicago, it does get cold, but we have the ability to do it inside as well. And now once they're there, for most of these kids, it is their first time stepping foot on a college campus. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to go ahead and build the stadium there, was not only for the university, but for the community as a whole. Because, you know, one of the great things about all of us here, we all aren't here by accident. Somebody helped us get to where we are. And now here could be a motivation for a number of these individuals to go, this is what college looks like. This looks pretty cool. This looks exciting. Doesn't mean they're going to go to UIC, but it could give them the idea to start thinking about what the future could hold. Because if I've never seen something, how could I even think that that's a possibility? And that's what we've been able to do with the Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy.
Jason, we would call that, if you can see it, you can be it, because that's how I got into sportscasting. I walked into the college campus of my brothers and they were watching ESPN and there was a woman talking sports. I had never seen that before. I had no idea what I was going to do with my career, what I was going to study. And then I saw it and I thought, oh my gosh, I could do that. So kudos to you, Curtis. Absolutely. That's very influential.
Thank you.
So one thing that I'm really wondering is, and we're going to touch on your career a little bit here because you only hit 300 and some home runs. I grew up a lifelong White Sox fan, always have followed baseball in Chicago, Major League Baseball. Remember after your tenure with the Yankees, when you were a free agent a couple of times, the big question was, is Curtis going to come home and play for the Cubs or the White Sox? So how close did you really come to playing for one of the two Chicago baseball teams?
Via free agent, zero. I never got an offer from either one of the two teams here, which is funny because I was a free agent 3 times over the course of my career. After that Yankee year, after my last year with the Dodgers, and then after my last year with the Brewers. So all 3 times, never had an offer to come here. Now, I was rumored in a couple trades, but those obviously didn't happen. And then even if you rewind back, I was a 3rd-round draft pick. So the Cubs and the White Sox had picks before me, but didn't select me. So, you know, the opportunity was there. It was a little bit out of my control. We actually did reach out to the White Sox towards the end of my career to see what was going on. And Kerry Wood had just taken a job with the Cubs. So I had spoken to him briefly. So maybe not zero. So maybe add 1% because I did speak to some people on both organizations, but never got an opportunity to come back home to either one of the teams. And I will say this. It would have been cool to do it later in my career than earlier in my career because I would come home for those 3-game sets. We'd play the Cubs or play the White Sox, and I would be exhausted afterwards. I'm seeing family. I'm seeing friends. I'm going out to eat. I'm hanging out. I'm trying to spend time at home. And this was just 3 games. So if it happened to be a whole season, it would have been insane. I'm not sure if I would have been able to handle it at the early part of my career. But a little bit later, everybody had already seen me play. They had already seen me play in Chicago. That hype and excitement around like, hey, we got to see you. If we don't see you now, we're not going to see you for a while. It kind of worn off. And I would have just been able to roll in and help either organization hopefully do a lot of great things. But the opportunity never presented itself.
You're a World Series champion. You won the World Series in 2009, the New York Yankees.
Actually, no. I got traded there after that one, so I missed it. I'm 0 for 3 in the World Series.
Really?
Yeah, I'm one of those crazy trivia questions.
Ooh, wow. That's on my research side. My bad. Anyway, my question is, you're an analyst for TBS. Postseason, the new format, postseason format in baseball, it's a very kind of contentious topic. With the World Series being Rangers Diamondbacks, obviously the Rangers win the World Series, well-deserved. They have their first banner in franchise history. But people would argue that the current state of the baseball playoffs isn't the best way to determine a champion. As a former player and a current analyst, what do you think?
There's a couple things I would love to see change. First and foremost, you have games going into possibly November. That just doesn't make any sense to me. You play a season where you have a majority of your games in very nice weather all throughout the course of baseball. And now we're going to possibly determine the best team in baseball in some of the worst weather of your season. Now, luckily, Texas and Arizona each had a dome, so the weather didn't come into play. But if either of you were here for Halloween in Chicago, it snowed. So we're going to try to play a World Series game and figure out who the best team is in the middle of snow, or have to postpone that game and come back, and all these different crazy challenges. So that's the first thing. I'd love to see this thing finish a little bit earlier. How we do that, I'm not 100% sure, but that would be one of the first things I'd love to see. The second thing, baseball is one of those most interesting sports where time off does not do you very well, especially from an offensive standpoint. And I can speak from example. In 2006, with the Detroit Tigers, we had beat the Yankees, who nobody expected us to beat. We swept the Oakland A's, and then we sat for 6 days or 7 days, I think it was. And then we ended up losing to the St. Louis Cardinals, a team that we had swept during the regular season. Now, when you look at what happened in that game, we didn't hit to save a lick, and we had hitters on our team. Hall of Famer Pudge Rodriguez, Magglio Ordonez would have a batting title. Placido Polanco would multiple times get 200-plus hits in a season. And we couldn't hit to save our life, partly because of all those days off. Now, the pitching side of it still kind of holds true, and you see that happen. But now let's fast forward to where we are in the 2023 postseason. We see the Braves, one of the best best offenses ever put together, can't get it going offensively. The Dodgers, second best, can't get it going offensively. The Orioles can't get it going offensively. And I attribute a lot of that to the days off. So the one change I would like to see happen is get rid of the 3-game wild card, go to that 1-game wild card, because those 1-game intensities are insane. I got a chance to play in game 163 one time, Detroit Tigers versus Minnesota Twins. And I say by far that was the most intense, exciting, fun, crazy game I had ever been a part of. Winner, go home. And then you start things up. Now, you just bump all those teams that have won. They start to play a little bit earlier. And you make that first series a 7-game series versus a 5-game series if you want more games. And now all of a sudden, you still be right at the exact same spot. Because if you look at the National League, for example, not only did the Braves and the Dodgers each have all that time off, they played that Saturday. They were off on Sunday. They played on Monday. They were off on Tuesday. So in a matter of 10 days, they only played 2 times. So it is definitely hard in those scenarios to get it going offensively. So those would be some of the changes that I'd like to see happen.
Your postseason experience, 57 postseason games, 10 in the World Series. Curtis, one of the things that stands out about you, not just the complete player that you were, but the presence and the leadership that you bring to a clubhouse. It's something that I thought last year the White Sox were sorely missing. They had no leadership in their clubhouse. The Cubs had the postseason players who had brought that experience, but, they fell short skill-wise, pitching-wise, whatever. So put your analyst hat on. White Sox and Cubs, what do you see as what their needs are to become a postseason team long into the postseason?
Well, I think there's a couple things that factor into this, and I like a balance of everything you have going on. Analytics is the topic of conversation. You either love it or you hate it, but it is there regardless of what has happened. Now let's look at the teams that won. Bruce Bochy, somebody that won 3 World Series prior to winning this year based off of understanding the game, playing the game, utilizing some of the analytics, but really going off a feel. Last year, Dusty Baker, very similar scenario situation. So I think you need a combination of the two where you do have experience. It could either be from the manager, it could be from your players, it can be from the front office, but you need a level of experience. And what's crazy is because the average age in Major League Baseball is getting lower and lower and lower, that person who has the experience or who is the quote unquote veteran is now not necessarily realizing that they are the veteran. Because I played every year with 40-year-old teammates. Andy Pettit, Bartolo Colon, Kenny Rogers, Gary Sheffield, just to name a few. And now you're looking at these organizations, and the veteran on that team might be a 30-year-old, might be a 29-year-old. It's hard to go ahead and understand what that has to be. Now, again, you need somebody that can go ahead and produce for you in the offensive side of it and the defensive standpoint. But there's something about that experience. It's something about getting that team going. It's something about telling them, I've been there before. This is what to expect. That is very valuable. So if there are some opportunities for the White Sox to go ahead and get some veteran pieces, either via a trade or free agency, I think that could be a great move for them. They've just brought in Marcus Thames as a hitting coach, a former teammate of mine, Jason Bourgeois, somebody I've known very well. These are experienced individuals that know that side of it. So they've already started on that. I really like that side of things. From the Cubs standpoint, very similar. Pitching, I think, is one of those things that you're going to definitely have to have over there because Wrigley's one of those ballparks. It's either a love it or a hate it. You're either giving up a ton of home runs or no matter what you do, if it's windy, the ball's not going there. But it can mess with your psyche a little bit. And you saw it happen with Baltimore a little bit. Before they had made the adjustment to move the field back, pitchers did not like pitching there. Now you move the field back, it helps you. You bring in some players that have that veteran presence, and now that team off pitching-wise can do what they need to. Same thing with the Cubs. So veteran arm over there, some veteran pieces with the Cubs, I think are going to be two of the big keys this offseason and prior to spring training. That could be what can get both of those teams across the hump.
You played under Craig Counsell in Milwaukee. Craig Counsell is now the Chicago Cubs manager. Pretty shocking move last week when the Cubs swept in, parted ways with David Ross, brought in Craig Counsell. You played under Craig Counsell in one of his first seasons, man. No, 2018. He was pretty far along by that at that point. But anyway, you played under Craig Counsell, deep postseason run. His deepest postseason run actually was that 2018 team. What does Craig bring to the table as a former player, still a young manager? What type of manager is he?
I think that's exactly what I was saying that, you look for with the Cubs and the White Sox. He's not only been there from a player union representative side, so he knows what those players are going through and fighting for and trying to make sure that their scenario and situation is as best as it can be, but also somebody that has played. Not only has he played, but he's had success coaching it, being around it, winning. All those different things are just intangibles you can't replace. It doesn't matter what the analytics look like. He brings all those because he did it. He's lived it. He can experience. He can talk about it. He may be somebody that isn't always going to be the person to yell at you. But at this point in time, you don't necessarily need to get yelled at too much, but you need to know what you need to do to get yourself ready. And that's what Counsell does, not only with he himself, but the team he surrounds himself with. So that's going to be one of the exciting things to have for him, that not only does he bring in someone who's been in the division, who knows exactly what to expect with this market, because he's come in as the opposition, but he's also seen that fan base drive to Milwaukee and fill up the ballpark up there in those Cubs uniforms. So he's very familiar with all those things. And I think a lot of that stuff is really going to play very well for a team that had some success this year, just came up a little bit short. And I think he could be key to moving. Now, for David Ross, I had to look up. I go, when did they let him go? Did he quit? When did he get fired? I was confused. I go, don't they have a manager? But that's baseball. Some things happen sometimes that you can never expect. And I hope he ends up getting another opportunity, because I thought he had done an amazing job. And I'm sure he will sooner than later. But that's baseball for you.
My last question for you is, your name has been mentioned, whether it be on Twitter and other baseball circles, last year especially, with some of the managerial openings. You were my pick for the White Sox manager in the dream of all dream scenarios. Do you see this as something in your future, managing or even coaching Major League Baseball?
No chance. I do not want to do that at all. It's too long of a day. And the way I say that, so it's 2017. I'm with the Mets. We're in Atlanta. I go get something to eat. We have a night game that night at 7 o'clock. I'm coming back into the hotel, and it's around 11:30, 12 o'clock. My manager, Terry Collins, our bench coach, Dick Scott, our bullpen coach, Ricky Bonas, they're in the elevator dressed, ready to leave. I said, oh, where are you guys going to get breakfast at? They said, oh, we're going to the ballpark. Now I panic. I go, going to the ballpark? I thought the game was at 7 o'clock. They go, it is. We have to go in. We got to do our meetings. We got to do this. We got to do that. And I was like, and at the end of the game, the manager is the last one to leave. And prior to these rule changes, I mean, these are 3.5, 4-hour games. I go, okay, it's 12 o'clock now. We're not getting on that bus until at least 11 or 12 o'clock. That I don't know if I want to do that 162 times. So I definitely want to be around the game. Right now, I get a chance to broadcast it. We do some amazing things with the Chicago Baseball Educational Academy at UIC. And hopefully there might be some ways where I can continue to impact players, whether it be at the collegiate level, the minor league level, the major league level, in addition to me just communicating with them like I do right now. So there may be some opportunity for me to be involved with a team or the league as a whole. But from the managerial standpoint, it's a unless they start to do the things I talked about and get that season a little bit shorter, then I might start to put a little bit more interest into it.
Curtis, you must have some good genes from your parents, because you don't have any gray hairs yet. And if you were a manager, man, those would be popping out really quick.
You look at two sides of it. They show the president before they take office and what they look like afterwards. It's the same thing with the manager in baseball. It will age you. And no, I'm not ready for that just yet. Or maybe I can do it like Dusty or Bruce Bochy, come back when I'm 70, and then I'll go ahead and take a team at that point.
Hey, before we let you go, one more plug for the Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy. If people are interested, what are the age groups that are eligible to take part in it? I know it takes place at UIC, and how can people find out more information?
So follow us on social, CBEA_UIC. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And it's literally a wide range of ages. Some of our programs are specific 8 to 12. We do some 12 and 14U games and tournaments, but we've gone as young as 4 years old all the way up to 18 years old. If you want to be out there and play it, we have a spot or an opportunity for you throughout the course of the year. And it's not just hitting the ball and fielding the ball. We've done umpire training. We've done coaches training. We have a lot of things in the pipeline that are around and involved around not only education, but the baseball as a whole. So extremely excited. Thank you to UIC for giving us the opportunity to do so. But definitely check us out in CBEAUIC.org.
Curtis, you're the best, man. I owe you dinner at Chez Joel over in Little Italy. Anytime you're back in that neighborhood, and I'm there all the time taking my daughter to school and hanging out, dinner's on me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you very much. This is great.
Like the nicest dude of all time. Like, that was insane.
Let's just keep rolling here, because
yeah,
seriously, for our viewers and those of you who are listening to the podcast, we just went 10 more minutes with Curtis Granderson after the interview, talking about everything from social media to how the rumors get started with managers and who's up for different jobs and guys that he's, texting back and forth. Cannot tell you, Curtis Granderson, when I said that it makes Chicago proud, I mean, he's that good of a person too.
We always use the term friend of the pod. I think Curtis Granderson's like a good friend or like best friend of the pod after that. Like, that was just, especially for someone who grew up watching him, grew up going to games and watching him play, and like, that was so cool. And I mean, that's what the show is all about, Mom, is moments like that, doing such cool, in-depth interviews. That was so cool.
Hey, listen, this is the sportscaster and her son. I got to give props out to the Granderson parents, because, man, you raised a great young man, and, hats off to the parents as well. So that was really, really fun, Jason. I hope that his name, it is funny that he doesn't want to be a manager because of the hours, but I hope that he stays involved in baseball, because they need people like him.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Guys like him are such good ambassadors for the game, the positivity that they bring, the opportunities that they arise for people. Thought it was so interesting how he said that one of the reasons why he wanted to bring that to UIC is because there are so many kids in the area who have never been on a college campus, and just the exposure that they get from being around students and being on a campus with resources. Just such a great guy, and so cool hearing about some of the background to all of that stuff. And like I said, it's what this show's all about.
All right, Jason, do you have any predictions?
I always have predictions, Bob. So my first one is going to be Cubs related. Of course, we said that they're going to spend some money this offseason. I think they've got another shocker up their sleeve. And now I'm not talking a Shohei Ohtani shocker, but I am staying on the eastern part of the world. Say hello to who I think will be the newest ace of the Chicago Cubs, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the top free agent from Japan. He is expected to fetch a 9-figure contract. I don't need to read up this guy's stats, because if you look them up for yourself, you're going to be absolutely shocked. An absolute phenom. This kid is 25 years old. He's going to come into Major League Baseball and from day one be one of the best pitchers in the sport. All the big hitters are interested here. The Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Cubs. Cubs shocked us last week with bringing in Craig Counsell. I think they have another shocker up their sleeve. They've been linked to Yamamoto, but everyone thinks it'll be the Dodgers or the Yankees. I've got the Cubs here. I think that the Cubs have their new ace. They just haven't signed him yet.
I love it. Prediction number 2?
Yeah, prediction number 2. So my second prediction here, I'm going to say that the fire sale for the Chicago Bulls is going to start pretty soon. I think that before the new year starts, Zach LaVine will be on a different team. The Bulls core, I don't even know why they call it a core, because it's like the worst big three that anyone has ever seen. But that core is not going to win anything. And they're discombobulated. I think that the most emblematic thing of all time is the fact that they had a players-only meeting at week 1 of the season. Like, come on. So those players are already checked out. Bulls need to sell high on LaVine when they can. I don't even know if it'd be selling high at this point, but they need to get what they can for him. The Vooch contract's probably untradeable. DeRozan's a little too old. I think Caruso and Zach LaVine are going to be out the door. Caruso may be a little closer to the deadline, but I think that with James Harden getting traded a couple weeks ago, Damian Lillard getting traded a week before the season, it's not like trades can happen at any time in the NBA. And just reading the writing on the walls with how bad the Bulls have looked, Billy Donovan, it's his last year. He's a dead man walking on the sideline. So I think that Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso are going to be out the door. And what'll this be? 3rd rebuild in 5 years for the Bulls?
Merry Christmas to the rest of the NBA as they open up their presents and they unwrap the latest Bull.
Yeah.
Number 3, Jason.
All right. That was funny. So my third and final prediction, we haven't talked any Bears on this week's episode. Probably a good thing. I'm going to say that little Bears related one. Matt Eberflus is not going to be the coach next year. It's another one of those situations where you can kind of see what's coming already, and this isn't as much of a Bears thing. I think it's more of an NFL specific thing. The waiting on some of these head coaches, the life of an NFL head coach. We saw this happen in the NBA a couple of years ago, and it's still going on, where really like you have 2 years to start winning. You know, you get the first year to kind of lay the groundwork, and then the second year you need to see the groundwork start to develop a little bit. And neither of which has happened with Matt Eberflus. And the Bears are in a position where they're going to have at least one top 5 pick. They'll likely bring in a new quarterback. I think these things go hand in hand, but I don't want to predict the new quarterback because I've already done that before. So I'm going to predict a new head coach here, because the Bears have gotten this wrong the last 2 times when they bring in a quarterback, keep the sitting duck head coach for the quarterback's rookie year, and then bring in an entirely different head coach, an entirely different offensive system. I think this offseason the Bears will finally get it right. And if they have a top 5, top 3 pick where they can end up with Caleb Williams or Drake May, I think that will be part of what makes them pull the trigger on bringing in a new offensive-minded head coach and coaching staff to really grow with the quarterback.
All right, Jim Harbaugh. Got it. All right, our final thoughts. I think I love what Curtis Granderson is doing with his baseball, Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy. He is combining sports with education. He's opening up an opportunity for kids who may have never seen a college campus to see one by attending his academy. I think it's wonderful. I think it's important to grow the game of baseball, especially in the cities. And I think when you have a phenomenal spokesperson like Curtis Granderson, Chicago baseball will continue to turn out really good baseball players because of guys like him, and the White Sox and the Cubs with the programs that they have as well. That's really my final thoughts. Jason, our thanks to Curtis Granderson. We put up his social media handle. If you want to follow him with the Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy, you can do so on the web at cbeauic.org, on Facebook at cbeauic, and on Instagram and X at cbea_UIC. Jason, our thanks to Jake Cantu. He's our producer over at ESPN Chicago, where you get the audio portion on the ESPN Chicago app and on Apple Podcasts and wherever you may get your audio, along with our YouTube page, the Sportscaster and Her Son.com website. And really, that's and on Twitter, TSAHS Pod, TSAHS Pod on Twitter. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, just about any social media, Instagram, everything. So follow us there, right?
Yep. And I just want to say super quick before we let you guys go, if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice my beautiful or ugly mustache right here. For the third straight November, I am participating in Movember to raise money through build awareness for men's health. This November, I decided to take it up a notch. Usually I just do it for a week and then I'll shave because I don't like having it on camera. But this year I figured that it would be cool if I grow this out for my shows on the Field of 68, Texas Student Television, and of course here, in an effort to raise a little more money than I'm used to. So my goal for this November is $500. I'm already $340 of the way there. Once I hit $500, I get to shave. Really hoping that happens sooner rather than later. Right now my goal is Thanksgiving week. I do not want to get like the stuffing and the mashed potatoes and the casserole all up in my mustache. So please let me shave. Pitch in what you can. I'll put the link up on my social medias. Anything helps. Thank you in advance.
Proud of you for taking part in Movember. Not so proud of that caterpillar on your upper lip.
Mom, it's always great to talk to you.
You too, buddy. That's it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Curtis Granderson as well, and all of the fine folks at the Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy. He's Jason. I'm Peggy. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good one, everyone. So long.